You're listening to Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. We're doing a special Halloween episode for all you boys and ghouls out there. Gee whiz. I don't write this stuff, folks. Now, look, I don't know how to say this. I know that every October, people like to watch super scary classic horror movies at home. They go see all the new horror movies in theaters. And the truth is, I do not like horror movies. I do not like being scared. My producer, Kevin, sitting 5 feet from me right now, also does not like being scared. And because this is NPR, the official radio network of scared dorks, I'm willing to bet that you can relate to, right? Scary stuff is too scary. But there's more to the Halloween spirit than just getting scared. And movies can help you with that. What's Thanksgiving without planes, trains, and automobiles? Christmas without Charlie Brown? The 4th of July without, I guess, Born on the 4th of July. It's probably a bad example. Anyway, here to talk about Halloween movies Spooky and Ooky are two resident film experts here at Maximum Fun. They're panelists from the new Max Fun movie podcast, Who Shotcha? April Wolfe is a film critic who's written for LA Weekly, The Atlantic, NPR, Vice, and a bunch more. She works at LA Weekly. She's joined by Alonso Duralde. He's the film critic for The Wrap. April, Alonso, thank you so much for joining me on Bullseye. Always a joy to see you guys.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Here's the first thing. We're talking about Halloween, but I want to make it clear. I'm very afraid to watch scary movies.
I feel you. I'm a total wuss too. It is a thing now where not just my husband, but other critics we know like to sit near me at horror movies that I have to review because I'm the lowest bar of scared. And so watching me is part of the show. Whereas April is like, she is a tough mamma jamma over there.
April, it's like borderline your thing.
I think it is. It is my thing. I think it's probably been my thing since I was 3 years old. So
is that common among film critics? How many film critics do you meet who love horror movies?
I think that more recently it's become more of a thing. You have some younger film critics who are, kind of getting reared and blogging, and they have these fringe interests. But I don't think that that was the norm before. Kenneth Turan even wrote something today about how he doesn't review them and he just doesn't want to. And I totally respect his decision. I have a very different opinion, obviously, but I would say it's becoming more in vogue.
Yeah, genre got a lot more legitimacy, I think, with the sort of internet generation of film critics. And even before that, like the zine era of film critics, where they were sort of unapologetically all in for that. And in fact, maybe even started with horror movies and then started branching out to the rest of it. Whereas I think a lot of your traditional critics are more involved in the canon and, they'll talk about horror in terms of like, oh yes, Eyes Without a Face, or or Nosferatu, or even the Universal horror films. But yeah, I'd say now your young internet folks were weaned on Wes Craven and Tobe Hooper and those guys.
That's true. And you also have the women who are coming in who have a brand new take on all of these things that I think a lot of people weren't even thinking about.
You, April, were almost literally weaned on horror movies, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. I know. I think I'm probably a weirdo.
Yes. No, it's very weird.
I always make this joke that everyone I know saw Back to the Future when they were kids, and I was watching Sleepaway Camp. And I didn't see Back to the Future until this past year, and yes, that's my admission as a film critic that it took me quite a long time. But I was like, I don't know, there's some mixed messages for women in that film,
Yeah.
I just have a different outlook on
Whereas
things, I think.
I didn't see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre until I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
Because I was just a big chicken. And I'd lived in Texas, and I still wouldn't watch it.
My wife went to a children's birthday party as a kid, and I'm talking about, I believe it was her 8th or 9th birthday party, where the parents showed The Shining.
Oh.
And she was sincerely traumatized by it and has been ever since. I don't think she has watched a horror film since then.
I just got giddy thinking about that. I know that if I had children that I would not be allowed to do that now. I'm sure that someone would just call the cops, but I'm like, oh, what a cool thing to introduce your children to.
Yeah, April at 8 would have forced a friend to go with her to dress as the twins from The Shining, probably.
Yeah.
So now that we have established a baseline for tolerance of scariness,
Yes.
April, in deference to the fact that it is actually the Halloween season,
It is.
what is a recommendable, genuinely scary film for Halloween?
Oh, see, that's a hard one because, I don't often get scared by horror films. But there are ones that still really creep me out. And I still think that Don't Look Now is a classic for a reason. And I think that one it's fantastic performances, and it's also genuinely creepy because it's all set in Venice, and you have all these twisty turny pathways and some person in like a red jacket being chased, and it's genuinely creepy. And there's some religious stuff in there too if you're into that.
What's the premise of the movie?
God, Donald Sutherland. He's in Venice. He's working, and there's like a child who dies, I believe, and he keeps seeing this person who he thinks might be his child in his child's jacket. And at the same time, there's news about this kind of killer going around Venice. So you have all this atmosphere of just death and, very Edgar Allan Poe, I would say.
It's okay. It's okay. I won't hurt you. Come on.
Are there horror movies that I could watch and enjoy as a person who is afraid of horror movies? I'm not like, look, it's not pathological or anything, my avoidance of horror movies.
Yes.
I would say there are some old school films that are kind of creepy and atmospheric, but aren't going to give you necessarily nightmares. Like the original Cat People, for instance.
Yes.
It's very shadowy and there's a lot of implication involved, but it still sets this tone, and it's very kind of haunting and creepy.
What is the matter, Ernest?
And then, my suggestion for like Halloween movie for people who don't really like horror movies is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh.
Because that way you get Dracula and the Wolfman and Frankenstein, but it's an Abbott and Costello movie. So, the stakes are never that bad, and you're never going to be like too hiding your face in your hands.
Listen, you're making enough noise to wake up the dead.
I don't have to wake him up. He's up. I saw a hand.
You saw a head?
Uh-huh.
Where?
Right over there.
Let me see it.
Right over here.
Where is it?
I saw a hand there.
You don't know what you're talking about. You're all excited reading this legend. Now listen. Listen, Wilbur. I know there's no such a person as Dracula. You know there's no such a person as Dracula.
But does Dracula know it?
Are there things that are adjacent to the kind of horror themes that we're talking about that people could look at in Thanksgiving time and enjoy that aren't simply, Charlie Brown and The Nightmare Before Christmas?
What are your thoughts about, have you seen Trick or Treat?
Trick or Treat, I think, was fun. It's like a glossy anthology series. There's tons of great horror anthologies coming out right now.
Yeah, Trick or Treat is Michael Dougherty's film, and it's more about the idea of Halloween than necessarily being a horror film. There are some scares in it, but if you want a movie that really kind of celebrates the way we celebrate Halloween in this country and the autumnalness of it and that kind of thing, that might be a good one to start with. And, I think that John Carpenter's Halloween is, it's scary, but it's scary in a way that has been so often copied that it's kind of in our collective DNA now that you're kind of ready for it. Because even if you haven't seen Halloween, you've probably seen Halloween just from all the people who've been aping it over the years.
It's fun to kind of dissect the aesthetics of it. Once you're past the scares, it's great to just see what these filmmakers are doing, because horror is a place where filmmakers can experiment. And once you can get past the scares, you get some really amazing cinematography and effects and performances and storytelling. And that's one of my favorite parts.
There are also some interesting movies about the making of horror movies that, might be enough of a remove that make it more palatable. So you've got Hitchcock from a couple years ago, which is based on Stephen Ribello's book, Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho. There's, what's the one about the making of Nosferatu with Willem Dafoe and John Malkovich?
I was
Shadow of the Vampire.
Yes.
Yeah. So, there you can always step back a bit. And there are a lot of interesting documentaries about like certain horror series. Like there's one called Never Sleep Again about the Nightmare on Elm Street films that is quite lengthy but really goes into a lot of detail. I did a screening for Outfest once of the very gay Nightmare on Elm Street 2, and the guys who made that film came in and showed some clips. And there's another long one I think called Crystal Lake Memories, all about the the Friday the 13th movies.
Oh, see, I haven't seen that last one. Oh, it's on my list now.
There we go.
Tell me what's gay about Friday the 13th, too.
Everything.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2. It is super gay. It is. It's this teenager who is confused about his feelings. There's a gym coach who hangs out at leather bars and whips students with belts.
No! No! No!
Okay, I know that you two are sitting here staring at me, a man of whatever the opposite of steel is, a man who walks terrified through life, okay? Mm-hmm. But I presume that some of our listeners love being scared at the movies. If you were going to recommend one golden strength super scare movie, which is a well-known category.
It's on IMDb, I think, yeah.
What would it be? And I'm going to start with Alonso because I think this question is going to be harder for Alonso.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is, I think we'll let April wrap this baby up. I'm trying to think of like the times I've been most afraid in a movie theater. I mean, Aliens was one of them, but you know, I think again that's another movie that's been borrowed from so much that you've definitely seen it at this point.
There's also that also falls into the category of movies I should not have seen when I was 11. Oh boy.
But I'm going to go with, and this is a controversial choice because this is not a director that I generally like, Zack Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead. That movie made me sweat a lot.
Really?
Yeah. The tension mounts in a way that I literally remember sitting in an air-conditioned theater and just sweating. I was so nervous and uncomfortable and get out of the thing. So that's my vote.
April, you're going to have to pick a different Zack Snyder movie.
No! I mean, I don't know how to narrow it down. I do have to say that probably The Descent screwed me up the most because I have a problem with claustrophobic stories where you can't see what's in the dark. And you have all of these women who are spelunking, and they are in this kind of dark cave area. And, you know, one of them gets hurt, and it's not an easy thing to get back up to the surface. And so they're kind of trapped. But then at the same time, there might be something down there with them. And I think that the direction and cinematography of that, it really chilled me. It scared the excrement out of me because there's so much darkness, and there's something about the things that you cannot see that scare me more than you know, the monsters or the blood. That's what really gets me.
Dead animals. Hundreds of them. This is not good, guys.
Can we get out of here? Which way?
I don't know. What do you mean you don't know?
There's no breeze. It could be any one of these tunnels. Take your pick. Hello!
I shouldn't watch Man on Wire, right? That would be scary because he's so high up there he could fall, right?
Well, it's not as scary as The Walk is because, you know, he didn't take the camera with him on the wire, but Zemeckis fakes that so well that it's just like, ah.
I'm afraid watching the biplane movie that they show at Hearst Castle because I'm so afraid of heights.
This is a brand new dimension to you that I did not foresee.
I know I present like a real macho man. Yeah. You may have just been thinking of Kai Rizdal.
Oh God. Yeah. Sorry.
That's a man.
Well, April Alonso, thank you so much for giving us this worthwhile guide to the world of Halloween film on Bullseye.
Happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Film critics April Wolfe and Alonso Duralde from the brand new podcast Who Shot Ya? It comes out every week. You can hear April and Alonso talking with the show's host, the very funny Ricky Carmona. That show, Who Shot Ya? It's really a blast. Open up your podcasting app right now and subscribe.